Hey guys, it's Jason at Full Spectrum Power. It's Thursday afternoon. Um, I got a bunch of questions over the last week. It's battery season here, so I got a lot of phone calls. Uh, People trying to understand which of our two 16-volt batteries is right for them. I really love talking to people about this stuff. It's super fun. I love hearing the kind of the different combinations that people have, and kind of giving them advice on which one of the two products to use because they're really meant for different things. And I'll explain. Um, when when you're thinking about what battery you should use in your car, there's two main measures of a battery that you should concern yourself with. The first is cranking amps. Cranking amps was previously called cold cranking amps with like lead acid style batteries. With lithium, you can't use that figure. That the test doesn't apply to lithium, so it should never be used in regards to lithium. We use cranking amps because we can demonstrate, like this, which is the P mode of light, we can demonstrate that one, will discharge 1250 amps for 1 second, and so on and so on at 3 seconds, at 5 seconds, at 30 seconds. We measure these intervals and what it'll put out and so forth. So that's how we do it. Just so you know, when we measure a start sequence in an ECU, generally a modern engine, or at least an engine controlled with modern electronics, will generally start somewhere in the second range. So you have a couple hundred seconds of starter motor inrush, then you get cam sync, then it fires. So it happens super, super quick. So you generally speaking do not need 1500 or 2000 cranking amps. I've never seen an engine that takes more than 1200 cranking amps ever. And that's important to note because, our big battery is like 2500 cranking amps. But the 2500 cranking amps is kind of a byproduct of another figure, which we're going to talk about now. So you have your cranking amp figure. The other one that you'll see, on the sticker or on our spec sheets is amp hour capacity. It's a number plus AH. So in the case of this little battery, it's 24 AH. What that means is that it's 24 amp hours. It will supply 24 amps for 1 hour, or it will supply 1 amp for 24 hours straight, all above the stated voltage, which in this case is 16.4. That figure, to me, is much more important than the cranking amp figure, right? Like, as an example, when we did the PRI cranking test on that 632 a couple of years ago, that was a 16.5 to 1 632 or something like that. And both of our batteries spun it somewhere between 285 and 300 RPM, depending on like how many hits we had on it, because as the oil warmed up and everything, it would change slightly. But we've never seen, we've measured a lot of stuff, 959, 974s. I've never really seen an engine with a kind of a fresh starter, which is also a thing that affects speed, and decent wiring. I've never really seen any engine pull more than 1200 cranking amps for 3/4 of a second, maybe a second at the absolute most. So keep that in mind. So, but back to amp hour capacity, the really important figure in my opinion. Amp hour capacity is going to tell you exactly how long you are going to be able to run your car, right? So in general, like a car that gets pushed to and from the lanes, let's say a methanol car with mechanical fuel pump, no water jacket. They're not going to use a lot of battery, right? They may use 8-9 amp hours, maybe. Runtime is super short. They don't have anything cooling down. Like there's no electric fans, there's no electric pumps. So you don't have a high electrical load. On the other hand, like a water jacketed engine with a big electric fuel pump, even one that you push to and from the lanes, is going to chew up a lot more battery capacity because there's much more electrical load. And that's where, when you call and talk to me, that's when I'm asking you about your combination. That's why, right? Because if you don't have that 65 amp continuous from that giant brushless fuel pump, like you probably don't need all of the additional capacity. The additional capacity is nice for a number of reasons. I mean, like if you're a bracket racer and you get turned around very quickly, rain's coming in, we're going to finish everything up. They're not letting you go back to your pit to cool a car off or anything. Having the additional capacity is important. So our big battery, the P-Motive 2K, is 36 amp hour, right? It's 33% more than this one. Most of the other lithium batteries on the market, they usually claim to be about 20. When you measure them, they're a little bit closer to like 17 to 18. And as I said, like cranking is cool and it makes for a fun test, and I love seeing that stuff. But the reality is, once you're at the track, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. Like, most of these batteries, if all you were doing was just sitting there and, spinning the engine over, they could do it all day. But that's not what we're doing at the racetrack. You might be driving to and from the lanes and, all of that sort of stuff. So capacity really, really matters, right? And so when you're comparing these batteries, and even when you're thinking about like, which battery to choose from ours or for, any battery really, take into account the total electrical load that you are going to be, putting, or, the demand, the demand that you're putting on your battery, and then choose accordingly, right? So if you see somebody saying like, well, this one cranks the same as this one, which like our small battery, cranks relatively the same as the big battery, and it's designed to be that way, but it doesn't have the same capacity. So you will find yourself running out of electrical capacity, with a smaller, lighter battery long before the bigger, heavier, more expensive battery, because it was designed to do that, right? Like the big battery is specifically designed to make sure that you like literally never run out of capacity. And I would always recommend that you charge your battery constantly while you're at the track, right? But we have seen chargers break, and I've seen guys make multiple laps on one of those big batteries, and they'll call me and tell me about it, and I'm just like, oh my God, please don't do this. But that's a thing. And so just note this when you see people talking about this, make sure you understand that capacity is really like important, and maybe most important is finding a good balance between them, like understanding that you still need plenty of cranking power, and then plenty of capacity, and in there you want to have really great voltage stiffness under load, in other words, as you're going down track. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. If you guys have any other questions or comments about this, let me know. Thanks.